The first betrayal didn't come from the Democrats. It came from inside the House, and straight through the firewall that Donald Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson thought was unbreakable. Just past noon, as Johnson banged the gavel to open the committee's most anticipated budget hearing in months, his tone was confident, his face composed. But confidence doesn't survive long in a chamber where power moves faster than protocol. Within seconds, the room changed. No alarms, no speeches, just a silent tremor. 100 phones vibrating almost in sync. Congressional aides, reporters, even members of the panel themselves turned their eyes downward. On screen, in black and white. "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it. The sender, Elon Musk, he didn't tag anyone. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room, especially Mike Johnson, knew exactly who he meant. Donald Trump had thrown his weight behind the bill. Mike Johnson had staked his speakership on it. And Elon Musk had just set it on fire. Cameras turned instinctively toward Repl Jasmine Crockett. Her eyes skimmed the screen. One brow arched, just enough for the live feed to catch it. She said nothing. Not yet. She didn't have to. The tweet was already detonating across the Capitol like a controlled demolition, and the hearing hadn't even begun. Mike Johnson, perhaps sensing the shift in gravity, tightened his grip on the podium and leaned into the microphone. "Let's not get distracted," he said, calm but clipped. "The truth isn't in a tweet. It's here, in this room." It was an admirable attempt at control. Admirable and doomed. The murmurs on the Democratic side were now impossible to ignore. Staffers whispered, phones buzzed, and even a few Republican members glanced uncomfortably at one another. Musk hadn't just tweeted. He'd pierced a silence no one else in that chamber had dared to break. Johnson tried again, louder this time. "We won't let emotional outbursts on social media distort the fiscal realities we've worked hard to craft." But the room wasn't listening. It was watching. Watching him, watching Crockett, and above all, watching what Elon Musk might do next. Because if the richest man in America was willing to say, "I'm out," what did that mean for the rest of them still sitting in their party-line seats pretending the emperor had clothes? And then it came, quietly, from the right side of the room. A Republican congressman leaned over and whispered to his colleague. Not knowing the mic on the table had picked him up just faintly enough for the boom operator to catch. "If Elon turns on us," he muttered, "we lose the whole next generation." He wasn't wrong. This wasn't just a policy split. It was a generational fracture between an aging political machine and the icon it thought it still owned. No one had expected the first blow to land from Elon. But now that it had, the story was no longer about the bill. It was about who would survive standing next to it. Mike Johnson wasn't going to roll over, not when there were cameras, microphones, and at least 3 Fox News producers watching from the gallery. With the air still thick from Musk's digital carpet bomb, the speaker adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and launched what he surely thought was a masterclass in fiscal patriotism. $1.6 trillion, he declared, voice rising like a televangelist preaching debt forgiveness, is not a fantasy. It's the largest saving ever achieved by any government on planet Earth. One could almost hear the patriotic music swelling behind him, if not for the audible coughing fit of a Democratic aide trying not to choke on their coffee. Johnson pressed on. He called R&D deductions, bonus depreciation, and interest deductibility the engines of real growth, as if those engines didn't already come standard in every corporate tax shelter parked on K Street. But here's where it got rich. With all the smug composure of a man reading from a gospel he wrote himself, Johnson revealed he'd had a frank exchange with Elon Musk. Yes, the Elon Musk, insisting the billionaire was aware of what was in the bill. "If he's changed his tone now," Johnson said, eyes narrowing just enough to register indignation, "that's a personal choice." Ah, yes, because billionaires known for tweeting at 3 a.m. are usually the moral weather vanes we consult before passing trillion-dollar legislation. That's when Jasmine Crockett stepped in, eyes locked, hand raised with the precise calm of someone holding both receipts and restraint. "The issue isn't that Elon changed his tone," she said, her voice as clean and sharp as a cross-examination. "The issue is that you never spoke yours clearly to begin with. A subtle hit, quiet but lethal." Johnson tried to parry. "We don't need Elon Musk to legitimize the truth. We have numbers, and those numbers speak for themselves. Of course, if numbers really did speak, most of them in this bill would be screaming in deficit-colored neon." Then came the punchline dressed up as strategy. Johnson, in what could only be described as a political suicide mission disguised as a power move, ordered a document projected onto the screens, an internal record showing Tesla had lobbied to retain federal subsidies during the bill's drafting phase. A giant, glittering gotcha served up like a courtroom twist, but one that only twisted the knife further, because the signature on the letter was unmistakable. Elon Musk, inked, dated, and sent directly to the budget office. The same Musk who just hours earlier had called the bill a disgusting abomination. The same Musk now painted as a backdoor wheeler dealer playing both sides like a Wall Street saxophonist, busking for whichever ideology dropped the most coins. The room didn't erupt, it recoiled. This wasn't vindication, it was political whiplash. Musk's critics blinked, his defenders stared, and somewhere in the murmur a staffer muttered what everyone else was thinking. Maybe he never left the system. Maybe the system just got better at dressing him up. Either way, the question now wasn't whether Elon Musk had played the game. It was whether Mike Johnson just revealed a game none of them were ready to admit existed. And as the projection dimmed and the room sat stunned beneath fluorescent lights, Crockett leaned slightly forward, lips tight, waiting. Because the next card hadn't been played, and she had it. It would have been easier for Jasmine Crockett to dodge the Elon question. Most politicians would have danced around it, blamed a staffer, shifted the narrative, or buried it under 3 layers of passive-aggressive moral fog. But Crockett didn't flinch. She looked at Johnson, then at the screen behind him still glowing with Musk's signature, and said with a tone as dry as a Texas summer, "If Elon lobbied to keep his subsidies, at least he didn't lobby to kick 13.7 million people off Medicaid." That wasn't a defense of Musk. That was an indictment of the bill, and of every suit in the room who co-signed it while pretending it was the 10 Commandments wrapped in red tape. Then she did something almost cruel in its precision. She lifted the hearing's printed copy of the budget, thick as a Vegas phone book, deliberately unreadable by design, and began reading. Not from the abstract, not from the cover page. She flipped, calmly, to the exact place where the legislative axe fell. "Page 62, she said. "Third line." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. A $290 billion cut to nutritional assistance. That's what it says. And 13.7 million Americans off Medicaid. But sure, let's talk about Elon's EV credits. Mike Johnson, who only minutes ago had performed a fiscal soliloquy worthy of a Heritage Foundation gala, now fumbled through his notes like a man looking for the last page of his alibi. Papers rustled, eyes darted. But Crockett wasn't finished. "If you can read far enough to page 278 to protect Elon," she said, "you can at least flip back 200 pages to learn who you just sentenced to hunger." The line landed like a slap dressed as a suggestion, and while Johnson scrambled for the rhetorical exit, Crockett stayed locked in, unfurling the bill line by line. No sound bites, no slogans, just facts, raw, surgical, and lined with venom. "I don't care how much you dislike Elon Musk," she said, her gaze sweeping across the Republican side. "But when you cut medication, cut milk, cut life itself, you don't get to pretend Elon is the problem. You are." The room, previously humming with MAGA bravado, fractured into quiet discomfort. The Democratic side didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. Reporters typed frantically. One chyron flashed on a cable news screen. Crockett punches through Johnson's data shield. And while Mike Johnson sat frozen, held hostage by the very bill he claimed was his masterpiece, Crockett delivered her final line like a dagger dipped in italics. She held up a page, not a headline, not a quote, but the actual text. Page 279. "And this," she said, "is why not a single state can touch AI for the next decade. Because someone made sure your governors would read the wrong line and miss the one that matters." She turned the page toward the cameras. The font was small. The language was lawyered to death. But there it was. "States shall not restrict." That's how you bury a nation's future, right between two commas and a committee vote. And as the camera zoomed in, the question now wasn't whether Johnson could defend his numbers. It was whether anyone would dare read the rest of the bill before it read them. The thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene is, she never walks into a room quietly. She enters like a marching band with a megaphone, tuned exclusively to the frequency of performative outrage. So when she raised her hand and asked to speak, everyone in the chamber, left, right, and chronically online, expected fireworks, not friendly fire. And at first, she delivered exactly what the base tuned in for. "We cannot allow tech billionaires to dictate national policy," she declared, like she was auditioning for a Fox Nation miniseries titled Red, White, and Paranoid. Johnson exhaled. Relief flickered across his face. The cavalry had arrived. Except it hadn't. Somewhere between righteous fury and page 279, something shifted. MTG flipped through the printed bill, perhaps expecting to find another line about gun rights or gender bans, but instead found the legislative equivalent of a landmine. "Wait a minute," she muttered, her voice no longer riding the wave of certainty. She squinted, then read aloud, slowly. "States shall not regulate or prohibit AI development or application for a duration of 10 years. Cue silence. Not just the awkward kind, the career-altering kind. For a woman known for bulldozing facts with feelings, Green now looked like someone who'd just realized the bulldozer was aimed at her own base. I wasn't aware this was in the bill, she admitted, voice wobbling between confusion and fury. No one in my office flagged this. Of course not. Why would they? When you spend more time filming Instagram rants than reading legislative clauses, details tend to slip through like tax loopholes in West Palm Beach. Then, Jasmine Crockett, still seated, still calm, offered a line so sharp it practically required a trigger warning. Wasn't flagged, or wasn't allowed to be. It didn't need to be louder than a whisper. It just needed to exist. MTG tried to recover. She squared her shoulders, raised her voice half an octave. I want this provision removed in the Senate, she said. If it's not, I won't support this bill on its return. Noble stance. If it weren't delivered after publicly admitting she didn't read the thing the first time. It's the congressional equivalent of eating an entire pot of chili and then asking what was in it. But just when it seemed Johnson might salvage control, the hammer dropped. A Democratic staffer stood, holding up a printout, an internal memo from Johnson's own office. It confirmed what everyone suspected, but no one wanted on record, that leadership knew about the AI clause and made a strategic decision not to highlight it, lest it distract from the larger narrative of fiscal responsibility. Translation. They buried the lead and hoped no one could read. The camera panned to Johnson. His expression had hardened into something between granite and guilt. And in that stillness, MTG murmured something not intended for the mic, but caught by it anyway. You hid this from me. Not shouted, not dramatic, just betrayed. It turns out, when you build your political brand on chaos, the only thing more shocking than watching your enemies turn on you is watching your allies do it first. And this wasn't the end, not even close. Because the man they'd all dragged into the center of this storm, the one who'd just been accused of cutting deals while throwing punches, hadn't even stepped into the room yet. But Elon Musk was coming. And they knew it. He entered like a glitch in the Matrix. No entourage, no binder-thick testimony, not even a single lobbyist lurking behind him. Just Elon Musk. In a tailored blazer, walking into the Capitol hearing room like he was about to sell the building, demolish it, and launch its ashes to Mars. The room, moments earlier still buzzing from Marjorie Taylor Greene's unexpected self-immolation, fell into a synchronized hush. Phones paused. Coffee cups froze mid-air. Even the stenographer looked up. Mike Johnson, ever the Southern host in a storm he could no longer control, stood up with a smile so tight it could have been stapled on. We welcome all Americans with an opinion, he said, his voice doing that tightrope dance between gracious and panicked. Musk didn't smile back. Instead, he stopped mid-floor, let the silence wrap around him, and replied with a tone that could cut drywall. Opinions aren't the issue, he said. The issue is, who gets to hide them, in 12-point font, between two lobbyist-crafted paragraphs. No dramatic preamble, no personal anecdotes. Just 3 facts, delivered like data points in a quarterly earnings call of doom. Number 1, Musk began. This bill increases the federal deficit to $2.5 trillion. No tremble, just math. Number 2, 13.7 million Americans lose Medicaid coverage. Number 3, $664 billion in tax breaks go to the top 1%. Then came the kill shot. I'm not here for the Democrats. I'm not here against the Republicans. I'm here on behalf of basic arithmetic, a skill this chamber has apparently decided to outsource. It was, to put it bluntly, a massacre by subtraction. Johnson scrambled. "Mr. Musk," he began, reaching for that well-worn DC deflection known as gracious interruption, with all due respect. But Musk wasn't accepting respect. He wasn't here to be respected. "I didn't come here to be respected," he snapped, his voice low, clipped. "I came here to expose a national bankruptcy plan disguised as legislative craftsmanship. 400 pages of small print, coded giveaways, and economic gaslighting." The room didn't erupt. It froze. Lawmakers from both parties leaned back, some calculating political fallout, others wondering if their next campaign mailer had just exploded in real time. Reporters typed like court stenographers on Red Bull. Cable news producers mouthed "go live" into headsets. One tweet read, "Musk just called Congress functionally illiterate." And they're nodding. He wasn't done. "If calling this out makes me a traitor," Musk concluded, tone now almost bored, "then maybe the movement I'm accused of betraying was never built on truth to begin with." It wasn't a mic drop. Musk doesn't do mic drops. He does firmware updates that leave empires crashing. And judging by the silence that followed, the only thing louder than his voice was the realization that truth had just walked into the room and didn't need permission to speak. If Elon Musk cracked the dam, it was Thomas Massey who yanked out the steel bolts. Calm, almost apologetic, he raised his mic with the resigned tone of a man who just realized he'd been voting for a bill he hadn't fully read. 3 times. "I went over the legislation 3 times, he admitted. "I missed the AI clause. Musk didn't. That was it. No defense, no spin, just a confession that rang louder than any accusation. The kind of honesty that, in Washington, usually comes with a resignation letter or a subpoena." Then came Rand Paul, delivering his version of a fiscal eulogy. "If we pass this bill," he warned, "the $2.5 trillion debt it brings is ours, not the Democrats'. Ours, and I won't be signing my name onto that ledger." You could hear the sharp inhale from the MAGA bench, a movement that had branded itself the guardian of frugality now caught mid-heist, holding the bag with receipts taped to its own name. Sensing the rebellion blooming inside his own camp, Mike Johnson reappeared at the podium like a man trying to duct tape a burning bridge. "This is not the time for division," he declared. "It's the time to unite against those who distort the truth." Ah, yes, when in doubt, scream unity. Because nothing screams stability like watching your caucus melt in real time while hashtags riot on X. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't about to let him rewrite the script. She cut in, voice steady, eyes locked. "Unite for what, Mr. Speaker? To freeze state regulation of AI? To gut Medicaid and call it modernization? To sell austerity dressed as innovation?" Her tone wasn't angry. It was surgical, and the incision was fatal. Johnson, now visibly straining, fired back one last soundbite. "We have the right to choose growth. We do not have the right to pretend stagnation is compassion." A line meant to reclaim control, to reframe the narrative. But it landed with all the weight of a campaign bumper sticker on a sinking ship. Because by this point, it wasn't Musk or Crockett who were distorting the truth. It was Johnson's own reflection cracking in front of him. Then came the death knell. A senior aide from Johnson's own office posted a resignation letter on social media. Not leaked, not anonymous, public, signed. The final line read, "I was taught that transparency is the foundation of trust. I can't serve where trust is something we're taught to avoid. The tweet racked up 100,000 likes in an hour. Then came the hashtags, Johnson collapse and Elon was right, rising like smoke from the wreckage of a movement that once preached disruption but couldn't survive being disrupted from within. What came next wasn't just fallout. It was repositioning. And in Washington, that's far more dangerous. Because when a structure begins to fall, the smart ones don't scream. They pivot. And someone, somewhere in that room, had already started planning the pivot. By the time Chuck Schumer walked into the press circle holding his phone aloft like it was a constitutional relic, the Republican side of the hearing room had already entered its unofficial witness protection phase, silent, stone-faced, and collectively praying the cameras would stop noticing they were still in the building. But Schumer wasn't there to whisper. He was there to weaponize. Holding his phone up for every lens in the room, he read it slow and clear, like gospel passed down from the billionaire on high. Shame on those who voted for it. Not a footnote, not a nuance, just raw condemnation, tweeted, screenshotted, immortalized. Right behind him, Bernie Sanders delivered the kind of rebuke that would have sounded radical if it hadn't been, well, exactly true. No civilized country, he barked, slashes $290 billion from food assistance to hand $664 billion in tax giveaways to the wealthiest 1%. It wasn't policy analysis, it was moral indictment. And, with the MAGA bench reduced to spiritual yoga poses of silence, no one dared interrupt. Back inside the hearing room, Jasmine Crockett stood again. No gloating, no theatrics, just a line so quietly devastating it cut deeper than all the shouting that had come before. "I'm not here to praise Elon Musk," she said. "I'm here to praise the courage that died in this chamber a long time ago and came back to life through a single tweet. The line didn't just land, it embedded itself. And suddenly, Elon's words weren't just criticism. They were CPR on a Congress that had been flatlining on integrity for years." At this point, MAGA wasn't losing the argument. They were losing the script. No rebuttal, no redirection, just a slow fade into legislative ghosting. Then a reporter cut through the silence like a wiretap. "Mr. Musk, are you collaborating with the Democratic Party?" A dangerous question, the kind that usually triggers legalese or cowardice. But Musk didn't blink. He answered with the calm of a man whose moral compass had gone algorithmic. "I'm not collaborating with anyone," he said. "I'm collaborating with what's left of fiscal sanity." It was the kind of quote that instantly becomes currency in the political economy of symbolism. Within minutes, a national headline screamed, "Musk versus Trump, the most symbolic split since Reagan." That wasn't just a headline. It was a historical marker. The moment the most famous capitalist in the country looked at the party that once called him their mascot and said, "Not with this math, not with this morality." And while the hearing rolled on in procedural time, something far bigger was shifting in real time. Not votes, not alliances, but identity. Because once the lines between power and principle blur, who you stand next to suddenly says more than what you stand for. By the time Mike Johnson returned to the witness stand, the room had already developed that particular kind of silence. Heavy, judgmental, the kind usually reserved for the final 10 minutes of a sinking campaign or the moment before a CEO cries in a Senate hearing. His jaw was locked. His hands clutched the edges of the podium like it was the last moral surface he had left to grip. "There are moments," he began, when a leader must accept being misunderstood for the sake of a greater cause. It was the type of line that hoped to echo in history books, but instead landed with the flat resonance of a politician trying to frame cowardice as courage. Jasmine Crockett didn't buy it, and she didn't blink. "Or maybe," she said, her voice like a scalpel dipped in velvet, "you're just afraid that if you ever spoke the truth, the entire movement would collapse before you even left the chair." Johnson straightened. He tried genuinely to pull the mask of conviction back over a face already cracking with doubt. "We're not afraid of collapse," he insisted. "We're afraid the American people might start to believe that Elon Musk speaks for them." The statement, clearly intended as a line in the sand, only drew attention to the waves already washing it away. Crockett responded without raising her voice. She didn't need to. "If he doesn't speak for the people," she asked, tilting her head slightly, "why is he the only one in this room who actually read the whole bill?" Behind her, the MAGA delegation, once so loud, so certain, so smug in its fiscal crusade, now resembled a row of mannequins stripped of slogans, blank stares, folded arms. The sound of losing faith made flesh. Johnson gave one last flicker of resistance. "History," he said, "will vindicate us." It was a fragile hope, the kind uttered by people who already know history has left them behind. And then he folded, literally, closed his folder. Didn't thank the chair, didn't nod to staff, just turned, walked off the platform, and disappeared down the aisle like a man leaving a room where he used to matter. No applause. No one followed. It was the quietest revolution ever televised. Not a fall from grace, but a slow, public slide into irrelevance. And outside, the headlines were already drafting themselves. Mike Johnson leaves podium, legacy TBD. It started like all great political earthquakes do in the 21st century, with a blurry photo and 1,000 unanswered questions. Taken under the harsh yellow fluorescence of a Capitol sublevel corridor, the image showed 3 silhouettes exiting a private room: Elon Musk, Jasmine Crockett, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, the billionaire disruptor, the Democrat firebrand, and the woman once dubbed the MAGA Queen. No statement, no smiles, no context, just the undeniable fact of their presence, together. By morning, the photo had become digital scripture. Analysts dissected the body language. Pundits speculated on the lighting, but it was a single tweet from an independent reporter that gave the moment its mythology. They didn't deny it. That's all that matters. It was enough to break the dam of speculation wide open. The theories came in hot, caffeinated, and unapologetically deranged. Is Elon funding a post-partisan PAC? Is MTG negotiating her exit from MAGA? Is Crockett bridging the most unlikely coalition in modern history? To be clear, no one had facts. But in Washington, facts rarely trend. Narratives do. And this one had the scent of rebellion, betrayal, and something neither party was prepared to name: recalibration. Mike Johnson, who had just 24 hours prior proclaimed unity through clenched teeth, now found himself barricaded by reporters hungry for blood, or at least a coherent denial. His answer came sharp and cold. Elon is no longer part of us. No elaboration, no emotion. Just the sound of a door slamming shut behind a man who realized too late that the movement he helped build had quietly changed the locks. And while Johnson played excommunicator-in-chief, whispers from inside Trump's inner circle confirmed what many already suspected. The former president had issued a soft gag order. No interviews, no tweets, no acknowledgement of Musk's name in official messaging. The strategy was simple. If you can't control the narrative, erase the character. But in the age of screenshots and search engines, erasure is fantasy. And that Capitol hallway photo, grainy, off-center, casually history-shifting, was already cemented in the American psyche, not because of what was said, but precisely because nothing was. Because in a town built on noise, silence like that is never accidental. And now, the question wasn't what had just happened. It was what the hell was coming next. Tucker Carlson opened the evening broadcast with a tone usually reserved for obituaries and revolutions. Some people, he said, eyes locked on the camera like it owed him money, used to be the soul of a movement. Tonight, they're the soul that chose to walk alone. It wasn't a headline. It was an epitaph. And every viewer knew exactly who he meant. Marjorie Taylor Greene had vanished. No press, no tweets, no strategic rants filmed in the back seat of a Ford Raptor. Her office lights were off for the third day in a row, as if silence itself had become her last political statement. No denial, no defense, just a closed door and a country speculating at full volume. And then, without warning or fanfare, Elon Musk reappeared online, not with a new message, but with the original one reposted like a knife, twisted slowly. This is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. One word added, confirmed. No apology, no clarification, just confirmation. From the man who'd set the match to the movement and calmly watched it burn. Meanwhile, on CNN, Jasmine Crockett faced the camera with the composure of someone who no longer believed in the script but understood the power of a closing line. Sometimes, she said, eyes unflinching, the old dissident becomes the new ally, as long as he stops lying. That was it. No media tour, no hashtag, just the truth, dressed in cold restraint. And somewhere in the algorithmic bloodstream of the internet, a video from the hearing went viral. Elon Musk standing alone in front of a silent room saying, "If the price of truth is exile, then exile it is." It wasn't a resignation. It was a declaration of independence with Wi-Fi. Outside, the Capitol lights still blazed as they always do, majestic, sterile, unbothered. But behind those marble walls, something had shifted. Not just alliances, not just talking points, but the foundation itself. Because a system that depends on idol worship cannot survive when the idol walks out, tweets confirmed, and refuses to look back. History didn't just take a turn. It detached. Clean, unapologetic. And all that remained was the echo of one question that no one inside dared to ask out loud. What happens when the truth leaves the room and takes the spotlight with it?